Right, I want to return to that report I took you through last night, the 2022 Australian Electoral Study. It's an ANU, a deep dive into the election. As said, in politics, I think it's one of the best documents around. It's available for all of you to read at home. Get on the ANU website and have a look at it. But one of the findings that was of interest last night, Teals, their voter base is far more left-leaning than Liberals. Only 1 out of the 5 Teal votes in May came from people who previously voted Liberal. So 4 out of 5 Labor voters. There was also some other interesting analysis I thought we'd pick up tonight. This relates to millennials. As people age, they used to, so the theory went, become more and more conservative. But that's not the case with millennials. And some say this will cause an existential crisis for the Liberal Party. Joining me now, political analyst Jennifer Oriel and the Executive Director of the Menzies Research Centre, Nick Cater. Nick, I mentioned the term existential crisis. They say that the millennials won't vote Liberal as they age, unlike people that previously start lefty when they're at uni and then become more conservative as they age and mugged by reality and mortgages and all of that. Do you think that's true? Because it hasn't played out yet. This is what they think will happen. And you've got Liberals there saying, well, that means we've got to go to the left, people like Matt Keane, if we want to keep this millennial vote. I'd argue that's not the case, but what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it's an existential crisis, Peter. I think that these things can be pulled back. I think the Liberals have just been a little bit slow in recognising what's happening here. And there's a lot of things happening. It's cultural things, it's higher education. But a big thing I think that's been overlooked is the economic issue here. As we know, millennials are finding it much harder to get into home ownership. And one of the things that drives the Conservative vote, the coalition vote, is home ownership. 38% of Liberal voters are people who own their own home. So what you have here, I think, is a need to go back to the fundamental messages that Robert Menzies put out to encourage people and assist them to buy their own home at every age. And I think get young people into property ownership quicker is going to be the way to fulfill their dreams and aspirations, and also, coincidentally, I think, drive more votes to coalition parties.
Another thing, Jennifer, I thought that really struck me was allegiance. So in 1967, 72% of us voted for the same party from one election to the other. Today, that figure's 37%. So politics is a lot less tribal. The votes are a lot less rusted on. We know, right across the community, people aren't volunteering like they used to. They're not going to church and other organisations like they have in the past. Is this a broader societal change, and what sort of challenge is it?
Hi, Peta. Look, I think the issue of millennial voting is an interesting one. We have to remember that this generation most of them have not lived through a severe financial crisis as adults. And I think the big change that's going to happen in the next few years and in the lead up to the next election will be that the economic story, the economic picture is going to decline. We'll have a decline in the standard of living in Australia. And as Nick has said, the big ticket issues will be cost of living, affordable housing, and I think some family-friendly policies. But a community engagement strategy is also really important. You just mentioned that we don't see as much volunteering or church attendance and so forth. And what the Teals did right, and what I think a take-home message from the Victorian election that Jess Wilson, the new member for Kew, spoke about, was community engagement, door knocking, getting back to basics, going around and having really good conversations with people about what they want from policies, what the most important matters are to them, what Liberals should take to the next election. Those sorts of things are really important and they're basic. There's no need to panic. There's just a need to get back to basics and do the groundwork.
And that local ground game is what my previous guest, Dan Tehan, said the National Party is doing very well, and that's where the Libs need to improve. Let's go to climate change, Nick. This whole diplomatic relationship, we're out of the freezer, we're told, with Beijing. One of the things they say they want to cooperate with Australia on is climate change. Give me a break. We're shutting down all of our coal-fired power. At the same time, they are currently building over half of all the new coal-fired power plants around the world. Have a look at the difference in our CO2 emissions as well. China over 11 billion tonnes of CO2 annually. Australia 300 million. 11 billion for them, 300 million for us. This is crazy if we're going to meet them over something like this, isn't it, Nick?
I think when they talk about cooperating on climate change, what they mean is they want to sell us a lot more solar panels and a lot more wind turbines. I mean, with the way we're getting in hot to China on this stuff is just incredible. 95% of solar panels, for instance, are in part at least manufactured in China. 40% of them in Xinjiang province, which is, of course, where the Uyghur slave labour occurs. China is the Saudi Arabia of solar panels and wind turbines. And if we think that our future is getting dependent on them for these things, then we're in serious trouble, I think. We're really in big trouble over this. And I think we have to address this question above all before we go too far down this wind and solar route.
And of course, we only get about 25 years out of both the turbine and the solar panel. And you've got this redundant kit all over the country as a visual pollution, and you then have to replace it all. So China stays rich the longer in renewables.